Ah yes, My Little Pony: A New Generation. The movie that managed to single-handedly persuade people within the Brony fandom to awaken from their almost 2-year-long hibernation. The movie that probably made every single MLP analysis YouTuber cry themselves to sleep trying to figure out how it's connected to Gen 4. And most importantly, the movie that introduced a bunch of new ponies for everybody of all ages to obsess over. And so, in order to celebrate the movie soon turning 1 year old, here is a short little retrospective of My Little Pony: A New Generation. So naturally, instead of going back 1 year, I am going to first go back 5 years to 2017 instead. Alright, I guess I'll start now. Alright, so at this point in time, My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic is on its 7th season. A feature-length animated film has been released. It gets absolutely panned by the critics, but it's all ultimately worth it in the end, because general audiences seem to enjoy it, and it of course makes a butt-ton of money for Hasbro. So everything was basically going just fine. Up until a user on the Pony-chan image board decided to do a little tomfoolery by gaining access to Hasbro's internal servers and leaking a bunch of behind-the-scenes content related to Gen 4. There was a bunch of miscellaneous interesting stuff here, but among the contents of the leak were a collection of emails sent back and forth between Hasbro executives discussing what exactly they should do for Gen 5 of MLP. And notably, there was also this image of a proposed roadmap of upcoming MLP media that includes this prompt entitled G5 Season 1, apparently slated for a 2020 release date. Yeah, this didn't exactly age well. After the leak, not much big information regarding any Gen 5 media would come out for a good while, but a few tidbits of new info about Gen 5 would still nevertheless be occasionally brought to light. To give a few notable examples, it was confirmed a few times that there was going to be some type of movie released around September 2021 that would mark the beginning of Gen 5. There was in fact going to be a whole new cast of characters, and that the movie itself would be animated using CGI. Oh, and it was also eventually revealed in an article that the movie would be set in the same universe as all the Gen 4 stuff, but apparently just set really far into the future. So, you know all of those characters from Friendship is Magic that everybody spent like a decade or so watching? Well, they're all canonically 6 feet under now. However, that being said, things in terms of more specific details about Generation 5 wouldn't really start to be released or teased until February of 2021. It was reported that the movie would debut over on Netflix, which is totally everybody's favorite streaming service. And everything came to a head when on February 22nd, 2021, a day in MLP history that sort of lives on in infamy, Jerry Fabrics, some random merchandise company based in the Czech Republic, accidentally uploaded an image of a licensed bed set featuring characters from the movie to their website. So naturally, this made everybody that found out about this quite excited, because this was quite literally the very first glimpse into the new movie, and by extension Generation 5 as a whole. So yeah. After that, some more stuff happened, but honestly, none of it is necessarily too noteworthy. The majority of it was basically just even more little teasers or tidbits of information regarding the movie slowly getting released throughout the course of a few months. Like screen caps of the movie itself, or kind of bizarre promotional material. Like, seriously, I do not know what this meme is supposed to mean whatsoever, and I absolutely love it. But that being said, during this period of time, it was revealed that the voice actors of the new characters in the movie would apparently be comprised of a bunch of popular A-list celebrities and or movie actors. Yeah, so the movie could pull in more audiences or something.
Hey everyone, Vanessa Hudgens here. I am so excited to finally tell you that I'm voicing the one and only Sunny. And I have some new friends trotting alongside me.
And it was also revealed at some point that the full title of the movie would be My Little Pony: A New Generation. Very cool. Though anyways, several months later in August, the trailer for MLP: A New Generation finally dropped online. It was a pretty cool trailer in my opinion. It definitely did all of the traditional trailer things. It gave us more information on the new characters and setting. And it of course also showed off the pretty cool looking 3D animation of the movie as well. Which, by the way, I didn't mention earlier, but all of the animation was done by the Irish animation studio based in Dublin, Boulder Media, so that's definitely quite awesome. Though anyways, I'm going to have to give this trailer an 8.4 out of 10 on the completely non-existent trailer scale that I just made up. So, everything was going pretty well. However, there was still a few small hurdles. Like the entire plot for the film literally getting leaked online in the form of a picture book by a Tumblr user. And the entire movie itself getting leaked after some people with access to early private premieres of the movie decided to record it all with their phones and started uploading clips of it to YouTube. Though, honestly, this probably didn't really even matter that much. Primarily because the quality of most of these bootleg cam recordings are absolutely terrible. They literally look like they're all recorded with flip phones from the year 2004. However, all of these leaks and whatnot put aside, My Little Pony: A New Generation was nevertheless finally released to Netflix on September 24th, 2021. So yeah, let's actually talk about the movie itself for the rest of the video now. I think it's best that I stop talking about who the new funky ponies are, and instead start talking about what they actually do in the film, by giving a brief, totally accurate summary of the narrative. Alright, so in this town called Maritime Bay, the Earth ponies there don't like Pegasi and Unicorn, because the 3 different pony tribes within Equestria have of course reverted back to not liking one another for like the 40th time. Seriously guys, this whole shtick is honestly just getting really old at this point. Anyways, this one pony called Argyle decides to not dislike the Pegasi and Unicorns and teaches his kid named Sunny all of the normal friendship stuff that we all know and love. Flash forward a little while, Sunny is an adult now, Argyle is dead. like seriously, we legitimately don't see him ever again after the time skip, so this man is quite literally dead. Anyways, Sunny meets this unicorn called Izzy that just waltzed her way into Maritime Bay, and so the two of them go off and eventually find some Pegasi or something, and the totally cool city that they all live in, Zephyr Heights. They meet the Zephyr Heights royalty, which notably includes Zip and Pip, and so, after Hitch catches up with them all, they all do a little bit of conniving around, if you will, and then try to restore magic in Equestria by reuniting 2 crystal artifacts. But damn, it doesn't work. Alexa, please play royalty-free sad violin music. This is just so heartbreaking. But oh wait, hold on just a minute. Apparently some random lamp that Argyle made for Sunny a long while ago for some reason contained a sword crystal the entire time. So after this Sprout guy, who by the way kind of went for tyrannical dictator mode in Maritime Bay for some reason, comes along and destroys Sunny's lighthouse. The 3 crystals decide to activate and finally restore all of the magic across Equestria or something. That's definitely very cool. But do you know what's even cooler than that? Sunny getting transformed into an alicorn, but with the opacity of her new wings and horn being torn down to 50%. That's quite awesome. And also, damn, it took Twilight Sparkle 3 entire seasons to become an alicorn, while it took Sunny less than 2 hours. Talk about simply great time improvements, really. Sunny truly did cut off a massive amount of time from the becoming an alicorn any percent speedrun category on speedrun.com. If you were to ask me, this is beyond impressive. Alright, that's the end of the film. Now, I do acknowledge that I may have skipped over a few small details here and there, but who cares? I'm not going to do an actual full, in-depth, serious recap. If you haven't already, for some reason, just go watch the movie itself. So, I thought that I might as well briefly turn into an MLP reviewer and dedicate some time in this video to give some of my own personal thoughts on the film. So, if you don't want to hear me ramble on about my own opinions for a while, then just skip over to whatever timestamp that's currently being shown on screen or something. So first of all, the animation in A New Generation looks pretty superb. I already mentioned them earlier in the video, but the animation done by Boulder Media in this movie looks amazing, so serious props to them. This might sound a bit odd, but my personal favorite thing about this movie in terms of its animation would probably be Izzy's hair. Like, seriously, her hair is in strands, and is basically constantly moving and flowing around whenever she's moving, so it must have been an absolute nightmare for the animators to get it looking not only good, but also look natural. Now, here's some of my thoughts regarding probably one of the most important parts of the movie, which is, of course, all the new ponies it introduced. I thought that Sunny was a pretty decent protagonist or main character, all things considered. I think the conflict we first see her have in the movie of having this big desire to try and change the world in a positive way, while simultaneously being constantly surrounded by no one but quite close-minded individuals, is legitimately pretty interesting and compelling. And of course, I thought her entire journey of actually doing that and ultimately bringing positive change in the world around her by restoring the magic in Equestria was also pretty fairly enjoyable to watch. So overall speaking, I would say she's definitely an alright character in my opinion. Hitch's character arc of learning to be around and being more accepting of unicorns and Pegasi was also nice to watch. And he was also voiced by that guy who starred in the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie, so that's pretty neat.
The Blue Devil.
Throw in, find a glove, fly around, up.
Then there's Izzy. Well, I think Izzy was basically just doing her own thing, but she's nevertheless pretty entertaining to watch. Just in terms of humor, she's definitely the most funny character in the whole movie, so I thought she was a pretty decent character. Then after that, there was Zip. I thought she was cool. She certainly got a fair amount of good moments in the film, and while she isn't my personal favorite, I definitely understand why people like her. She's kind of your generic athletic character to a certain extent, but it's shown that she also has a smart side as well. So I think she's a decent and overall well-rounded character. And finally, we got Pip. Now, don't get me wrong, I do not want to anger the Pip enjoyer army. But honestly, just in terms of how she's presented in the movie, I thought she was definitely the weakest character out of the main five. Now, I'm not saying she is necessarily a bad character, but like, beyond a certain point, she doesn't really do much in the film at all. But that being said, while she may not be the most interesting or even noteworthy character in the film, I swear I would die on the hill of her still being a very cool character. So, I thought the characters that make up the main five are mostly decent or at the very least tolerable to watch. Though that being said, there obviously are side characters like Sprout, Phyllis, Queen Haven, and Alphabetal, but truthfully I don't really have much of anything interesting to say about them. But I guess I did find Sprout and Queen Haven to be probably the most enjoyable and entertaining to watch side characters. They both have a fair amount of decently funny moments throughout the film, especially Sprout. He's basically the center of a bunch of alright gags. And if you ask me, the Danger Danger song was also quite fire. Speaking of the Danger Danger song, putting all of this stuff about the characters aside, I think the music made for this movie was also nice. 7 original tracks in total were made for it, and my personal favorites are Gonna Be My Day, I'm Looking Out For You, Danger Danger, and Fit Right In. While I know these songs may not exactly appeal to everybody, I still personally thought that they were mostly decent. The other 3 tracks, on the other hand, are all pretty much what I would describe as being the songs of all time. They're all far more forgettable in my opinion. I know this will likely come off as very vague, but the best way to describe it is that they sound too much like random nameless pop songs you would hear being blasted on the radio or something. Though that being said, overall the soundtrack is mostly okay in my opinion. So, if I had to turn into Anthony Fantano and rate it on a scale, I would probably give it a 6 out of 10 or something. Now, there are 2 more final things I want to talk about, and those things are the narrative and pacing of the movie itself. The story that is told and presented in the movie is mostly fine in my opinion. I personally don't have much to critique about it, but honestly, I wouldn't necessarily blame anyone who isn't a fan of it either, as it's a fairly linear and simple plot that isn't too complex. But like I just said, it's nevertheless still alright. The pacing, on the other hand, is, in my opinion, probably the most easily identifiable negative aspect of the entire movie. Personally, I just felt that some scenes ultimately felt somewhat oddly rushed and short. I believe this was likely most evident in about the second half of the film, particularly with like the last 15 to 10 minutes of it. The ending, while I thought it was mostly decent, still felt kind of poorly done to me just in regards to how fast it all happens, which I thought made the entire sequence sort of lose a little bit of its emotional impact. But hey, to be fair, I believe it's also important to acknowledge that all of the people who worked on this movie obviously had to make the story they wanted to tell fit into the roughly 90-minute runtime. So, with that in consideration, I think that things like the narrative and pacing weren't really that significantly bad in the grand scheme of things. Anyways though, now onto the question of, do I personally think that My Little Pony: A New Generation is a good movie? Short answer, yeah, it's mostly alright. Long answer, when judged on its own as a standalone product, I would say it is overall a decent above average animated kids film that certainly has charming and entertaining moments in it. But I think it nevertheless still has some negative qualities that I believe may also understandably affect how some other individuals end up viewing and perceiving it all as a whole. Alright, now back to the rest of the retrospective. So, I've given my own thoughts on the movie, but truthfully, my opinion doesn't matter. So, let's see how the movie was all received by other people instead. With all sorts of various things ranging from random YouTube reviews with 20 views, middle-aged women leaving their thoughts of the movie on IMDb, or articles published by massive corporations assessing the movie. Firstly, on the mostly positive side of things, A New Generation was overall reviewed fairly well by both general audiences and movie critics. It was mostly commended for its good-looking animation, the new characters and their voice cast, entertaining humor and callbacks to Gen 4, and of course its primary moral lesson of ultimately meaningless divisiveness and misinformation spewed on by hate being pretty cringe. Multiple articles were published by companies like the New York Times or something, with them stating such things like, "In search of sacred objects that might restore magic in Equestria, Sunny and Izzy assemble an eclectic team of progressive youngsters." I mean that's technically not wrong, I'll give them that. After the movie itself premiered on Netflix, it literally temporarily became the top worldwide movie on the entire streaming service. So I guess that probably gives a good idea of how popular it was back when it first initially released. And to add to that, the movie was also eventually nominated for the Best Anthropomorphic Motion Picture category in the Ursa Major Awards, a series of yearly awards given out to pieces of media primarily about and or related to the furry fandom. So, yeah, that's awesome. Like I said, A New Generation was only nominated though, so yeah, that's not quite as awesome. On the more negative and critical side of the spectrum, however, a lot of points were made across the board by various parties critiquing things such as the movie's supposed poor writing, bad pacing, and one-dimensional characters. Now, whether or not these criticisms are actually valid is totally up to you, but I thought that a few of these miscellaneous takes regarding the movie were nevertheless pretty interesting to say the least. For example, there are the subset of people who only seem to dislike Gen 5 and the movie because Gen 4 ended. I mean, don't get me wrong, I too also cried when Friendship is Magic ended in 2019, but it honestly feels quite petty and kind of silly to solely dislike something just because the previous iteration of that something came to an end. And then there was, of course, none other than Fox News that decided to publish an article claiming that MLP had apparently gone woke. Which, real talk, this statement doesn't really make much sense if you think about it for more than 10 seconds. Like, even all the way back in Season 1 of FIM, I would say that a few fairly progressive topics and issues were featured and addressed in episodes. So it's legitimately a logical fallacy to claim something like, oh, the liberals with the blue-dyed hair and pronouns have gotten their hands on MLP and turned it woke. Because that's simply not the case. And another funny thing to add to this is that I found this incredibly odd news segment video from Fox News, where for some unbeknownst reason Sprout is compared to Donald Trump. I swear, stuff like this literally makes me convinced that the world ended in 2012 and we've just been living in some type of weird simulation ever since. But yeah, that all aside, this section basically just summed up the general critical reception to the movie. It was either A, grounded reviews with legitimate criticism, or B, just kind of confusing off-the-wall nonsense. Now that I've talked about the reception though, I'm going to wrap this all up now. Alright, so right about now you might be asking what was the actual point in me making this short retrospective video about MLP A New Generation. Well, first of all, I just felt like talking about ponies for an extended period of time. And secondly, in all seriousness, I do think it is legitimately interesting to see what impact that the movie had on the MLP franchise and by extension the MLP fandom as a whole. Because even though MLP had already kind of been on a steady resurgence of popularity fueled by early 2010s media nostalgia ever since around early to mid 2020, due to, well, everybody being stuck indoors, A New Generation being released was effectively what really finally put new official life into the franchise. I believe that it basically showed that even though G4 was over, newer MLP content very well still could be pieces of media that people could simply just sit down and enjoy. And personally speaking, I've also talked with several people who have said that A New Generation pretty much renewed their interest in MLP as a whole. It motivated them to do things like go back and rewatch old episodes of FIM that they hadn't seen in years. And regardless of what your own opinions on the movie or Gen 5 are, I think most people can agree that it's awesome to see MLP in general being revisited as a result of it. Anyways, that aside, I did briefly mention it a few times, but it kinda goes without saying that there is more to Gen 5 than just A New Generation. Most notably, there is Telltale, a 2D animated series that is exclusively uploaded to YouTube itself in order to rig the algorithm or something. A video game entitled A Maritime Bay Adventure that was released to a whole bunch of platforms. Comics made by IDW, and Make Your Mark, a 3D animated series on Netflix made by Atomic Cartoons that's sort of similar to the movie, but at the same time you don't really need to be a genius to figure out that it is pretty different. The most noticeable changes in Make Your Mark are probably things like the animation looking like the budget was cut in half when compared to the movie, and the celebrities who voiced the cast of ponies in the film being replaced with, you know, actual normal voice actors. Due to these and a few other reasons, when the debut special episode of Make Your Mark premiered in May of 2022, while there were a good chunk of people that thought it was at least okay, there definitely was a far more noticeable amount of criticism floating around and whatnot when compared to the movie, with a fair amount of people online pointing out things like all the weird animation errors, how the animation in general looked oddly cheap and plasticky, and how the story in the special itself just kind of seemed mediocre, and to some even a little confusing or poorly paced at times. In my personal opinion though, I don't think Make Your Mark is the worst thing ever. It certainly has its redeeming qualities, but at the same time, yeah, honestly, a lot of the criticism that it did and still is receiving is genuinely valid, and there's definitely some room for improvement for future episodes of Make Your Mark to say the least. Meanwhile, the other stuff I mentioned a moment ago, like Tell Your Tale and the video game, were all received relatively fine enough, although that being said, they also have their own fair share of critiques that I won't bother getting into here, because that would be fairly off topic, and the whole discussion would likely be better for its own dedicated video anyways. So, that was My Little Pony: A New Generation. Regardless of personal opinions and biases, no matter how it's looked at, it objectively did make a pretty significant impact on My Little Pony in various miscellaneous ways. One of the most important ways was the movie evidently paving the way for the rest of Generation 5 of MLP by establishing all of the new characters, settings, themes, and everything else new. Now, whether or not all of these new characters and changes that appear in Gen 5 content are actually good or not is entirely up to you to decide. I'm not really here to try to convince you to change your mind or say that your opinions about Gen 5 are invalid or anything. But in conclusion, I still believe that, generally speaking, what the movie and the rest of Gen 5 have done so far is okay, or at the very least, commendable. And I think it's always good to acknowledge that. Anyways though, with that all having been said, that's all I really got to say about these Gen 5 pastel colored horses now. So I do hope that you enjoyed this little retrospective of My Little Pony: A New Generation. If you did like it, then, you know, do all the normal things you're supposed to do after watching a video that you enjoyed. Like, comment, share it around, email a link of it to your employers, or do whatever else you feel like doing. It's completely up to you. I'm not sure if this video turned out the best, but hey, I personally still had fun making it. So, you know, that's what counts, I guess. I've got absolutely nothing else to say now, so I guess I will see you all whenever I see you.